friends. Welcome to episode 43 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, starting my 13th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself and my interview guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. There is an important group of listeners I would like to recognize before we start. The more I hear from listeners, the more I appreciate the significant number who are library staff members. As is often the case with districts attempting to make do with less, a single certified school librarian will oftentimes oversee multiple buildings, each with libraries staffed with an assistant or tech. Some districts use the term library paraprofessional or para. Putting aside all the politics behind the district's decisions to staff their school libraries with certified school librarians or library assistants, I would like to make sure that all library paraprofessionals, assistants, and library techs feel welcome to our listening community. I try to be mindful and refer to everyone who works in a school library, but I will most likely fall back on the title school librarian. I want to assure everyone I'm not trying to be exclusionary. In selecting episode topics and assembling materials each week, I want to be as inclusive as possible, regardless of your role in the library or where you are in your career, whether rookie or veteran, whether you're a graduate student or you're a teacher contemplating enrolling in an endorsement program. I would like to extend a very special welcome today to listeners Debbie in Washington and Ashley from Mississippi. Ashley raised a very important point in her email, and I wanted to share it. In bringing in experts on a topic, it is possible, as a listener to the podcast, be both excited to learn new strategies and have access to great resources in the show notes, and at the same time, feel inadequate and humbled to realize just how accomplished some of our peers are in the field of school librarianship. I'd like to mention my absolute favorite article when I feel this way, which is more often than you would think, by Margaret Sullivan, and she posted an article in February 2019 on Knowledge Quest titled, Your PLN, Source of Inspiration or Thief of Joy. I've used this article before in this podcast. I think it's terrific. Make some time to read the article in full. I love this one takeaway. Quote, what's important is that you are making a difference for all the students you serve. That's the goal we all should have. We don't all have to accomplish it in exactly the same way. End quote. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions either on Facebook or Twitter or my email address, schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I will be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now, our topic for today's episode, advocacy at the state and district level. This past June, I recorded an episode titled Self-Advocacy, We Are the Resource. I could have just as easily titled it Self-Preservation, Fight for Your Job Like You Could Lose It Tomorrow. I knew in creating this episode it would be very limited in scope. I focused on advocacy at the building level because it is all I really know. I've spent the past 13 years fairly certain my job would be cut at the end of every year, and consequently, I find myself always trying to convince building administration, teaching staff, and families especially just how relevant I am to supporting literacy and student achievement. But this is hardly enough. Our efforts need to extend past the doors of our schools and resonate at the district and state level. To tackle these aspects of advocacy, I tapped the two experts I know, Margaret Sullivan in Missouri and Kathy Lester in Michigan. Here are our interviews. Kathy, I've known you for a couple of years, but I think everybody listening would like to know, how long have you been a school librarian, and a little bit about your journey to becoming one?
I've been a school librarian since 2001, so about 18 years. And I initially worked as a software engineer for a technology firm. And I started volunteering in my son's schools with the technology committee there. And their technology committee was school librarians. And they said to me, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And I'm like, I think I would. So I went back, got my already had a teaching certificate. I just had not used it. So I also updated my teaching certificate and then got my first job in 2001.
Wow. Could you tell us a little bit about your current library? Because I know that it's been recognized as being a model for school libraries in the state of Michigan. So tell us a little bit about what that's like.
I work at a middle school in Plymouth-Canton Community School District, which is the fourth largest district in our state. We have 5 middle schools. We have an excellent professional learning community within that 5 middle school librarian group, and they have been so supportive. But I have a flexible schedule, so I collaborate with teachers on projects, both research projects, teaching students research skills, finding and evaluating information, how to cite sources, how to avoid plagiarism, what copyright is, all of those things. I also collaborate with teachers on technology, how to integrate technology in important ways to get students creating. I also have an after-school maker club, an after-school Girls Who Code club. I do a maker innovation project with our science teachers. So trying to get kids involved with creating and critical thinking, all of that's basically part of the ASL standards. And the state of Michigan has school library 21st century benchmarks, which define the quality of a school library program in Michigan. And you do that with your principal, get approval from your superintendent, and every year they choose a different model school library. And my school library was chosen in 2017, 2018 to be that for our state.
Can I ask you, you have a fairly impressive title when it comes to advocacy. When did advocating for school librarians become important to you, and how has it led you to where you are now?
I've always felt that advocacy was an important part of my job, and it might have started initially just locally within my own building, with my principal, with the staff, trying to make sure that they knew about the service and parents as well, that they knew about the services I provided and what I could do for them and what I was doing for them. And then I went above that more to the district level. I think back in 2008, 9-ish, they had threatened to cut librarians at the district I worked in at that point in time. And I led an advocacy effort that year. We saved our positions. I spoke actually at the MAME conference in 2010 about advocacy. I think my title was Speak Up, Students Need School Libraries, was the title of my presentation that year in 2010. And then I went, when I became president-elect and started for MAME in 2013, and I started meeting with our Library of Michigan and asking those questions as I was seeing the number of librarians across our state decline. I started getting more involved. I met with the State Board of Education member in 2014. We had the State Board of Ed pass a resolution skipping the importance of school libraries staffed by certified school librarians. And then in 2014, when I was president, I think I ramped it up even more, trying to reach out to legislators to see what we could do about getting a bill or getting funding, just inkling it in. In 2014, at the ALA conference in Las Vegas, I went to an AASL advocacy training session that was taught by Ken Haywood. At that point, I think that's Ken Haywood, and it was an excellent advocacy training, and then I partnered with Gwen Marchesano, who was president the year after me in MAME, and we worked a lot together on advocacy. And then the following year, 2015, Lisa Brakel became president, and she basically asked me to step up and be advocacy chair. So ever since then, I've been working really diligently to try to advocate for school libraries staffed by certified school librarians in our state.
Well, I know that working at the state level has got to be incredibly time consuming. What do you find most fulfilling about it?
Working with the organization and working with other school librarians, I want to recommend that everyone join their state school library organization, because we really need each other. And a lot of times we're singleton in our own building. And so to have that connection with other school librarians, that has been a really important thing for me. And then the other state level work I do I do a lot of work with Department of Education. So not only do we advocate with educators, but we also advocate with our Department of Education to try to make sure that they're including school librarians in many of their initiatives. It's rewarding in the sense that I am hopeful and I see a little bit of positive movement. And honestly, to me, I look at what I do and I worry about the students that don't have those same services. And unfortunately, in Michigan, only 8% of our schools have a full-time certified librarian. So a lot of the students in our state do not have the kinds of services that a full-time library media specialist can provide.
So, Kathy, can I ask you, I'd like very much to share the MAME resource page, the advocacy resources, which you put on our statewide page. It's really well done. And I know you had a lot to do with putting all of those resources together. Can you speak a little bit to the resource page, which I will be including in the show notes?
Well, we have a toolkit Google folder, and we keep a lot of information in there, and we try to update it. And I think I even created a subfolder right now for SLM Info 2019, because there started to be so much in there that people were getting overwhelmed. So the 2019 subfolder essentially has some more recent information, but it has a lot of information in there. One thing that people still really like to see is the AASL infographic. That is in there. There's an infographic about school librarians as technology leaders. There's an infographic about our current situation in Michigan, about where we're at. We're 47th in the nation in terms of school librarians, and then what we really could provide. There's information in there about Dorcas Hand actually developed with a committee that she worked with, they developed a document that lists like what a certified librarian does, what a paraprofessional does, what a teacher can do, and it's kind of like set up with red, yellow, green to show like which things school librarians are trained in. And that has been a really helpful document in Michigan. We kind of got permission to create a Michigan version of that. And so that's in the toolkit.
Well, do you think that some of the challenges that not everybody appreciates all the different roles that school librarians who are certified to do our jobs, all the things that we can do? There's sort of that misconception.
Right. And so I put in there, I have we had recently created a bookmark for some of the initiatives that we've had, and on that bookmark there's 3 talking points. And so I think sometimes it's really important for you, and I know when I've gone to trainings they talk about elevator speeches, but it's kind of nice to have a few talking points that you remember and you can always bring up. Mm-hmm. And the 3 talking points that I always talk about is the school librarian, positive effect on reading achievement. The second is school librarians' involvement in preparation for college and career, and that has to do with both teaching those research skills, those information literacy skills, as well as teaching digital citizenship to our students.
Sure.
And then the third thing is that technology integration, that we support that technology integration and help our students become critical thinkers and creators.
I recently listened to your radio interview that you did with Michigan Public Radio. You seem to be everywhere in the state of Michigan, quoted in newspapers and on the radio and in articles online. How is it that all of these opportunities happen? Do you go after them? Do you seek them out, or they come to you? Can you give us the listeners some idea of how getting involved at the level you have has sort of opened opportunities?
Well, I do write a lot of letters. Some of the things came about because of me reaching out and me writing. If I see something come up, I respond to it. Like in the past, our governor had a early literacy commission, and I wrote everyone on the commission. So different things like that. And I wrote, when I saw a couple of newspapers writing articles about literacy in our state, I wrote to them, like, giving my opinion about, well, our literacy in our state is horrific, and we're not supporting our school libraries. And so then those things would go on to get published. But then also, like, you never know what little things that you do, they have kind of a rippling effect, and they come back to you maybe at some later date. And actually, like the Michigan radio interview, we had a meeting last February 2019 creating a coalition for Michigan school libraries. We had a lot of groups that we invited, and I invited a few reporters. And one reporter that came was Kobe Lovin from Chalkbeat, Detroit. And it took him several months, but he published an article in August that in Chalkbeat, but then it got picked up by the Detroit Free Press. It got picked up by Bridge, Michigan, which is another online news source that a lot of people read. And Michigan Radio read that article, and I forget, whoever they talked to said, "You need to talk to Kathy Lester." So they called me, and that's how that interview came about. So it just is.
One thing leads to the next.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask you, as a former civics teacher, I find the inner workings of our state government rather daunting, and yet you sort of throw yourself into it. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've worked with state legislators?
Well, I think when I initially got involved, that I did have that feeling of it being really daunting. Oh, I'm talking to these legislators. But, there really are people, too, and building good relationships is a really important part of good advocacy work, whether it's a legislator, your principal, other teachers you work with. And honestly, the first time I talked to a legislator, I was at a Library of Michigan board meeting, and they had a Michigan rep on the library board, and I actually landed up getting in the elevator with him.
Oh.
So I had my little elevator speech ready in my head and talked to him, and he was very receptive, and I followed up with more email information, and he responded, and then he met with me, and that kind of that positive experience got me then reaching out to other legislators and feeling more comfortable about it.
That's fantastic. Can you tell me, I have a lot of listeners who are just starting out as librarians. What kind of advice would you give to librarians who are really, well, honestly, I'm guilty. I need to be more involved in advocacy. And what kind of advice can you give to those of us who aren't nearly as committed as you are to the cause?
I feel that, you can start small. Don't make it feel so overwhelming. Advocate for your program within your building with a newsletter, reaching out to parents, making sure people realize that, some of the things that are going on in your library. If you join your state organization, many times the state organization will put out like a call for assistance with things, and that might just even be sending a quick email to your rep. Please respond to that. Usually they try to make it be so it would only take a few minutes for the other librarians, but all of those things are really important and helpful. As I mentioned, I think, we're in it together. And honestly, I might be chair of the MAME Advocacy Committee, but without the committee and the support of a really great group of individuals, we wouldn't have gotten as much done as we have and be where we're at right now.
Well, I have to say, I am appreciative that the advocacy resources that you've compiled are, a lot of them are easy to understand for individuals who aren't school librarians, because when these get shared out to our administrators and leaders at the district and the state level, they aren't librarians. And it really does make a big difference if I've got something in hand that I can share that gives me confidence to speak and make sure I'm not missing any of the important points.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And the advocacy committee created certain things or found certain things that ASL had already created, things like that were for those types of purposes, where we're trying to educate legislator or an administrator, superintendent, that type of thing. So we want to make sure we're not always speaking library speak, that we're speaking in terms that and always framing it. I don't think I mentioned this early, but everyone on the advocacy committee feels it's really important to always frame things about the services for the students and what the students lose by not having a certified school librarian, or what the students gain, in your library by your presence and while you're there. So framing things and the students is always a really important thing.
I did want to ask you, because I know that you've done work with Michigan's PTA, and I know that there are comparable organizations in other states around the country. What can you speak to? Why team up with the PTA organization at the state level?
I feel like the parents are a really important advocate for your library. In my current district, at one point in time, they were talking about cutting positions, and parents spoke up. And the school board really listens to the opinions of parents. So as we're working at the state level, I thought it was really important to reach out to Michigan PTA. And actually, again, I happened to be at a Michigan Department of Education meeting with ESSA, the Every Student Succeed Act. They were rolling something out, and I heard someone making comments or raising their hand and asking questions, and I'm like, that's a parent. By their questions, I could tell it was a parent. So at the end of the meeting, I went over there and introduced myself and started talking to them about trying to work together more. And we've been able, again, it's about relationships. So we've been able to build some good relationships with that group. And I'm finding Gwen Martesano and I went to the Michigan PTA convention this summer, and we found that the parents all want this for their students. Detroit Public Schools has very few librarians, there were lots of Detroit parents there, and they were like, how can we get this? What do we need to do? I mean, they're very, very committed to the resources that their students need to succeed, and that includes a certified school librarian.
Kathy, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your very busy night. It is, for those of us in Michigan, the first full day of school that we've just finished, and I know that my list of things to do has just gotten longer, but I really, really want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I honestly, truly in my heart believe that all students need school libraries staffed with certified school librarians, and that's why I feel committed to this work.
Thanks again. Have a great night, Kathy.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Margaret, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. How long have you been a librarian? And tell me a little bit about your journey as a school librarian.
Well, I started my career in education as a middle school social studies teacher. I taught social studies for 8 years. I taught language arts at the middle school level for 2 years. Then I spent 1 year as an elementary librarian, at which time I went to another district. That, it was a magical time in Missouri when school librarians were very much in demand. So I went to another district, and I have been a librarian now for 20 years. Yeah, and I'm currently one of 2 librarians at a suburban high school in Missouri. We serve about 1,320 students.
Fantastic.
Yes, and I'm also the lead librarian for my district.
Could you just, because that terminology may have an equivalent in other areas around the country, could you explain what your responsibilities are as a lead librarian?
As the lead librarian, it's sort of an extra duty contract, so I'm still assigned to my school 5 days a week. But I serve as a liaison between the librarians in my district and the curriculum department. I plan the professional development for the librarians, and I also manage a district level budget for libraries.
Okay, I do want to ask you a follow-up question.
Sure.
Do tell me a little bit, if you could, about professional development for librarians, because I'll admit I'm more accustomed to being grouped together with professional development for the teachers. So can you expand a little on what kind of professional development you would plan for your school librarians?
We meet for a half day every month as a group. There are 33 of us. So on those half days, part of it is often a business meeting where we might discuss concerns we have with strange things Destiny is doing, or, just sort of housekeeping items. But the larger part of the meeting usually has a professional development component. This is my 3rd year as lead librarian. So the first year, our focus was advocacy. Last year, our focus was the AASL standards. And this year, we're looking at a bunch of different things. It isn't quite as thematic this year. Usually one day during the year, I bring in an outside speaker to talk to the group.
I think it's a great opportunity. I'll be honest. I would like to think that all of us would have a chance to get together with our peers across the district, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. Right. Thank you. So let me ask you a little bit about your programming. What kinds of activities are you particularly excited about when in your library?
Well, 4 or 5 years ago, our 9th and 10th grade language arts teachers adopted a book club approach to reading. So students have a lot of choice. They have time in class to read. We do a lot to support that. We get to do a lot of book selection activities with those kids. We do a lot of readers advisory with them. Sometimes we do book conferencing with them to support the teachers. So that's something we're always excited about and we enjoy. We work with a freshman elective class for a semester called Freshman Seminar. We do a passion project or genius hour with them, which we like doing. And then we work with a variety of other teachers, just depending on what the need is. Our 9th and 10th grade social studies teachers work with us quite a bit. Yesterday, we did some work with 9th grade biology on databases and citing sources. So it just all depends on what people need and what's going on.
Oh, that's fantastic. Some of our listeners may recognize you from your AASL's Knowledge Quest. And that's actually how you and I met.
Yes.
So could you tell me a little bit about how you got involved with writing for Knowledge Quest?
Well, I've been active in my state organization for probably 15 years. I served on the High School Readers' Choice Award Committee, served on a couple other committees, served in the leadership rotation, so second vice president, first vice president, president, and past president. And I finished that rotation in 2017. I was looking for a way to continue to be involved in professional organizations. So I volunteered for AASL. I was then appointed co-chair of the Concurrent Sessions Committee, the National Conference Committee. So for the conference in Phoenix, I worked with another librarian to do the concurrent sessions, and I really liked that. Following that, I was trying to find a way to continue to be involved, but with a little bit less travel, because sometimes that's pretty hard to arrange. So I just sort of volunteered for Knowledge Quest, and they asked you to submit 3 pieces of writing. I did that, and I was kind of surprised when it was accepted. But it's something I've really enjoyed and continue to enjoy.
That's fantastic. Do you write for them as ideas come to you, or are you on a schedule?
Well, I write 1 blog post a month. So I'm always looking for ideas. And right now I have like 2 or 3 ideas, sort of rough drafts in the hopper. So I feel pretty good about that.
Well, and I imagine some of this is organic, that as things come up, you feel inspired and you
Yes.
start to write. That's fantastic. Yes. Could you tell me at what point in your journey as a school librarian did advocacy become really important to you?
Well, I think I've known since the beginning that advocacy was important. I just think that my focus on advocacy has changed somewhat, or maybe it's evolved is a better way to say it. Because even in my master's program, they really emphasized the advocacy. So I knew in my building that was important. I've always shared usage statistics with my supervising administrator and the head principal. I've always made a point of kind of trying to either do a monthly newsletter to staff or, periodic emails saying, hey, I'm getting ready to place an order. If there are some materials you need on a particular subject, now's a good time to let me know, or, just make sure people knew what was going on, but doing it in a way that they knew that I was trying to help them. I think that my emphasis changed a little bit to going beyond my building and even my district when I got involved in MASL, which is the Missouri Association of School Librarians, because we really felt that we were losing some ground in the state of Missouri. At one time, for our state accreditation in districts, libraries were a part of that. Districts got points for having appropriate staffing and having up-to-date collections. And there was a report that librarians had to file the end of every year that went to our Department of Education about the status of the library. And, that was something that we could say to our administrators, well, I have to fill this out at the end of the year, and it's not going to look good if, our collection is 25 years old. And, it just was very helpful. So as we started to lose some of that, in Massillon, we became more active in lobbying our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The year I was president of Massillon, I got a call. I remember it was September 24th of that year, 2015, and our representative from the Department of Education called me and said that they were going to do away with the report we had to do every year. And that's when Massillon decided to shift focus from the Department of Education to the legislature, because that's where the decisions are made.
It sounds like that was an important piece of leverage that you had.
It was, and suddenly we didn't have it, and we still don't have it. But we haven't given up on lobbying the Department of Education. We still have a good relationship with them, but we've done more trying to get legislation passed that will put libraries back on the radar.
Can I ask you, since you said the L word, lobby,
Yes.
how do you feel? Do you feel school librarians and our state organizations should have a lobbyist who is working on our behalf, a paid professional?
I think if your state organization can afford one, absolutely. I know, and we're fortunate in my state organization that we've had one for a long time, and we can afford to do that. Yeah.
If you had to guess, could you tell me how long Missouri's had an advocate for school librarians?
Oh, I know since at least 2009, maybe before that. But in recent years, we've asked more of her. We've gone to her and said, we would like this, we would like that. Because often our legislative platform, particularly in the past, were things like we wanted full funding for the foundation formula, which is certainly something we should want and that we should advocate for, because that's good for everybody. But we've asked for her to try to get more specific library-related legislation passed.
Oh, absolutely.
And she has really stepped up to the plate and done that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Listen, I wanted to, we will come back to this idea of working at the state level. I do want to make reference to the 2 articles that you have recently published on advocacy, and I'm going to be sharing links to that in the show notes for everyone to read, because I found it really incredibly helpful to see what you had to say on advocacy at the district and the state level. Could you, I saw, let's see, the show notes, the school librarians in my district, when we put together newsletters, the recipients are family members. We're sending our newsletters to the families, but your newsletters, you would say, should be directed towards the decision makers in your district.
Well, I think there's room for both.
Okay.
But the one that we do is directed at administrators, and when we started it, this is the 3rd year we've been doing it. So when we started it, it was really directed more at district level administrators, the ones who are at central office and aren't in a building every day anymore. Because they walk through buildings and they walk through libraries, but that's not the same as being in a building every day, the same building, and seeing what happens. So, and in my district, I do feel the district level administrators are supportive of libraries, but we wanted to make sure to keep it that way. And we wanted them to know what happened, what happens in our libraries. Therefore, I got a SMORE subscription, to use that template. And I asked the other librarians in the district to send me pictures with little stories about an activity they've done in their library or a special event, or anything that they think is newsworthy. And people send me stuff every month, and I just kind of use what they give me and put it together. And we do a lot of pictures with kids, and I email it out to the district level administrators, also to the principals. And then we generally tweet it out. And sometimes, very often, the district will retweet it, so families see it as well.
Well, that's very timely because we when this comes out, we will have also had an episode on using social media to as a way to showcase your library program, and that's just one more way that the messaging can reach a wider audience.
Yes.
So that's fantastic. Can I ask you? You had some unexpected benefits that you described in your article about having a newsletter that was shared out. And I found some of these were obvious, but not necessarily easier to advocate as a group.
It is easier to advocate it as a group. It's always been difficult for me, and I think a lot of librarians feel this way, to go around and talk all the time about, well, this is what I did. This is what I did in the library, because everybody is doing great stuff in your school, and you don't want to feel like, you don't want people to get the impression you think you're better than classroom teachers.
Yes, I believe the word you used was braggadocious.
Yes, that will be the one. Yes.
I can't remember seeing that word in print.
So the thing is, with a district newsletter, you're advocating as a group. So you're getting stories from all the different schools showing that all the libraries are doing great things, and it's much more of a group effort. So it just, the feel is a little bit different.
Sure. No, a shared message. I like the idea of a shared message. Your second point was that this was an opportunity for librarians within the district to share these ideas. It sounds like with 33 librarians, you have a lot of schools, and being able to share those ideas across the point. The next point you said was that it was an opportunity doing these newsletters for self-reflection.
It is. And, it's very helpful that way, because you look at the things that you share and you can really think about what your strengths are, and, maybe some of the things that you aren't doing as much of that you wish that you could do more. And I think that that's helpful, because, you might notice, one of the things I've noticed is when we share stories from my school, we do a lot with language arts and a lot with social studies, but, let's redouble our efforts to get some other departments in here.
Sure. Can I ask you, in your second article, you wrote about advocating at the state level.
Yes.
And we have listeners across the United States and around the world. And so I understand your experience has been with the state of Missouri. Can you explain how, and you mentioned a little bit about working with a lobbyist, but can you say something about how you've been advocating particularly at the state level?
Well, in 2016, we decided that the way to go was to try to get legislation. I had been following the Missouri Gifted Association's attempts to get some legislation that would support gifted programs across the state, and they worked with their lobbyist and got a law passed that would, I believe the way it worked was it would ding districts in the accreditation process that didn't have a gifted program, or it would cost them some money or something along those lines. But they managed to do that. I thought, well, this is what we need to do. And Mazel, so the board met and we talked about it and decided that that was the way to go. So our next step was to figure out what we wanted. I mean, obviously we wanted what everybody wants. We want a law that said every school has to have at least one full-time school librarian and a healthy budget and para support and all this other stuff. We weren't going to get that. We knew we would never get a law like that passed in the current political climate. So we got some help from AASL to look at what legislation other states had passed, and we modeled the bill we wanted off an Arkansas bill that required a school librarian in every school that had a library media program, and also required that their schedule be such that they had a third of their time to work on administrative duties. And our lobbyist found a representative who was willing to sponsor that bill. And that year we got a committee hearing, so we were happy that we got that far. The bill never got out of committee. But, it was a start. And our lobbyists told us from the beginning, consider this a 5-year process. You're not going to get this done year one. So we were okay with that. So the next year, the representative was no longer in office, so we had to start over with somebody else. And it was Representative Patricia Pike of Missouri who agreed to help us. And she wanted to model the legislation on something that had been done for counselors in the state of Missouri. So we worked with her, got this bill together that required our Department of Education to create a recognition program for exemplary school library programs. So nothing's really required, but at least it gives districts an incentive to look at their library programs. We managed to get that passed.
Well, it's fantastic. That really is progress. I think you hit on a couple ideas, and that is this isn't an instant fix. This doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. The changes, and I selfishly, I mean, as a librarian, one of the great things about being a librarian is that you can have instant impact on the programs that you create. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like the legislators are dealing with a much different time frame when they're dealing with passing legislation and whether or not they win their next election or stay in office. So that brings a challenge that we don't face in our workplace on a regular basis. Can I ask, because I have a lot of listeners who are very new to this profession and just starting out, I think it's so easy to assume advocacy is something that is relegated to those of us who have been in the profession a long time. What can you say to someone, especially who's starting out in their career as a school librarian, to help them start thinking about advocacy?
Well, I would say, first of all, join your state professional association and support that. When they send an email saying, hey, we need our members to contact their legislators about this bill or that bill, do it. Send a quick email to the people who represent you in your state capital. That's very important. Join ALA and AASL and do the same thing there, because national legislation matters, things like ESSA. So definitely you want to do that. And then in your building and district, find out what you can do to advocate. And a lot of advocacy is simply raising awareness of the services the library offers and why those services are important to the students that you serve.
Exactly. Margaret, I can't thank you enough. It is a Friday night, and everybody's had a long week, and you are still at school talking to me. So
I'm happy to do it.
I want to thank you so very much, and I know that everyone will benefit from what you have to share.
Well, I hope so. But yeah, advocacy is important, and you just have to figure you're in it for the long haul. You're not going to win every battle. That's part of the process. But, look at it as a long-term investment and advocating for our libraries and what they offer students, because that's what really matters. That's how we can sell what we do. It's not about us. It's about what we offer kids that makes them better rounded individuals and helps to enhance their academic achievement.
Oh, and we're going to leave it right there. That's absolutely perfect. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to Margaret and Kathy, whose knowledge, experiences, and perspective provide everyone listening today with ways in which we can all promote our profession. And I'd like to thank you for listening today. If you found this podcast beneficial, consider sharing this resource with your own circle of school librarians. Give a shout out on Twitter or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Listener feedback is essential to keeping this podcast relevant and valued by school librarians everywhere. Reach out either on Facebook, Twitter, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to send you a podcast sticker. The topic of our next episode will be occupational hazards. I hope you will tune in.